So look, you don't just start throwing 95 miles an hour unless you're crazy talented or genetically gifted. And so in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how to actually develop yourself to throw 95 miles an hour, just like I was able to do, and the pictures that you see on the screen right now. And to make this more interesting, I'm actually gonna create a complete plan for an athlete that I'm about to work with to get to 95 miles an hour. And I'm gonna try to do this all in the next 30 minutes, so let's start the clock. All right, so step one is to actually figure out what are we actually gonna work on with an athlete so that we can get him to 95 miles an hour. And so for the athlete that I'm gonna build this complete plan for, I'm gonna list out the characteristics and we're gonna see what exactly are like the lowest hanging fruits that we can work on to yield the greatest amount of results. So for this athlete, his characteristics are that he's 17 years old, he throws 78 to 82 miles an hour. And is 6 foot, 170 pounds. He has low strength numbers, right? This is something that we found from our assessments. We do a bunch of stuff in terms of strength, isometrics, obviously strength numbers, how good you are in deep positions, stuff like that. And what we found was that he has low strength. And then he's a decent athlete, plays multiple positions, runs pretty well, jumps pretty well. And then on the mechanics side, what we found was that he sucks at rotating. And I'll get a little bit more in depth on this. These are the characteristics. And from here, we want to find what are we actually going to be working on to, yield the biggest results, right? And so just looking at this stuff, we know that firstly, like this is going to be a huge one. If you have low strength, just by increasing that strength, you can see a lot of results, right? For example, Hunter, who I made a video about, he came to us, he was a really good mover, right? In terms of what we were actually working on, we didn't really have to work on too much on his mechanical side, but he was skinny, he was weak, kind of like this guy, right? Good frame, but like skinny, weak. And so just by putting him through a strength accumulation phase, right, where he actually got a lot stronger, bigger, he was able to find a lot of good results from it. And we built out a full program for Hunter and he was able to go from 82 to 90 miles an hour. And obviously we did a bunch more stuff than just build strength, but that was like the underlying principle of what we were working with him was we need to get you stronger, right? So that you have more force potential to be able to throw the ball hard. This is going to be a similar thing. So with strength, this guy is probably going to get put on a strength accumulation type program. Obviously, the exercises and stuff like that are going to be different because, through our assessments, we see, okay, where exactly are you weak and what exercises can we use to attack them? This is going to be compound exercises, right? And so what I'm talking about is squats, deadlifts, bench, all the big exercises. We'll probably strength accumulate him until he gets to a pretty good benchmark of like a good strength base, right? If you don't know what a strength base is, strength in pitching velocity goes like this. So if this is velo, right, and this is strength, if you're super, super weak and you throw, let's just say you throw 78, and then you start to gain a bunch of strength, right? Then the velo is going to shoot up from like 78 to about, it really depends, but it might go up to, 85, let's just say. But as you hit this strength base, right, this is the strength base, the more strength you add isn't necessarily going to mean more velo, right? There's a point of diminishing returns where now you have to start training different things to actually go above and beyond, right? That's why you don't see big leaguers who are pumping 500-pound squats and deadlifts because there's more risk to lifting that heavy than reward. This is where we want to get to, and this is what we want to tap into, right? All of this with this athlete, right? He is a not a very experienced lifter, and when we saw his lifting video, it also looked a little bit awkward, right? It's more novice type lifting, and so we want to get him to hit. Now the question is like, what is a good strength base? Like, what should you be aiming for? There are a couple things that go into this, but firstly, right, we want to get his body weight up, okay? And we want to get it to a good benchmark, and I'll explain why. So with the body weight, I like to see about 2.75 times your height in inches. So for this athlete, he is 6 foot, which is 72 inches. Multiply by 2.75 is 198 pounds, okay? Now, this is what we are going to start working towards is, okay, we want to be a 198-pound athlete, okay? And now why this is important is because the strength numbers are going to be determined by your body weight. I like to think about my strength base as in how much of your body weight can you lift. Okay, so if we're talking about the deadlift, right? I like to see about 2 to 2.5 times your body weight, okay? So that would mean for this athlete, I would want to see him with 4 plates on each side, right? 4 or 5, and that would be a pretty good strength base, right? I want to work toward that. Right now, he's barely getting up to about 300 pounds. You know, that's decent, but I would like to see his ability to produce enough force to lift 400 pounds to be like, okay, you know what? I think we're going to hit this, right? 300 is kind of a, 1.5 times your body weight. I think there's a lot more there. With a squat, it could go down to 1.5, but ideally it's also like about 2, right? And so if he is squatting, 315 plus, ideally like 350, right? Then I'll be like, okay, he's hit this. And then the upper body, I'm not as concerned about. Like if you're able to bench your body weight, so if you can do, 200-pound bench press for 1, then I'm like, okay, you're strong enough. And pull-ups wise as well, any type of pulling, I'd want to see multiple reps, right? Like 10 reps. So general body strength, that's how we would assess, like, is he getting strong enough to throw at an elite speed, right? For context, when I was throwing 95, I was deadlifting about 400 pounds, squatting about 350, and bench, I was always terrible at bench. So I was probably benching like 150 to 180. So the upper body, again, I'm not as concerned about, but these lower body, especially deadlift, squat, I want to see that be at a really good level, right? And obviously it's not only about these big lifts. There are other things that you can assess strength, like, are you really good in deep positions? How stable are you? How good are you at holding like isometric positions? There are different strength markers, but for a general benchmark, I would like to see one of these, right? And if you're not hitting that and you're not even close, then I wouldn't even think about any rate of force development, explosive type work. Just make sure that you're progressing in these two. And so for this athlete and his weight room program is going to be heavily focused on progressively overloading, right? Especially for novice type athletes, you can still get a lot of stuff out of progressive overload. And if you don't know what that means, basically what progressive overload means is like, okay, so 1 week, if you're doing squats, right? And you do, 225 for 5 reps. So if 1 week, right, you do 225 pounds for 5 reps, and you do that for 3 sets, and you're able to complete it. Next week, you're just gonna add a little bit to the bar and then try to do the same with 230, right? And then the next week, if you're able to do that, then you're just gonna continue to add weight, right? And eventually you're gonna stall, right? It's not gonna just continue to go to this until eternity. Eventually you're gonna get to a point where you just can't complete the reps, right? And that's where you would do something like a deload, where you would actually give your body some time to rest and recover, and then it comes back stronger the next week. Or you could also do something where you cycle it, where, okay, you're going up, you're going up, you're going up, and then, for example, on the 4th week, you fail 240, right? You only get it for like 3 reps or something. Then what you could do is come back here and then start here on week 5. And then when you do this, you usually break through in the next cycle to get to, you might get to 250 next time. But then you stall and then you come back to 240 and then you keep working back. And so progressive overload is really gonna follow this pattern, right? So you're gonna go up, go up, go up, and then you're gonna have to take some time to go down in weight and then build yourself back up to go up, right? I don't know why this is, but for building strength, this is probably the most effective way that I've found, and from the athletes that I've found, is following something like this so that you continuously make gains, right? What actually happens when, for example, you're in this position and you keep trying to put on weight, then you get this type of shape where you go too hard and then you're at this place where you're fatiguing your body, you go into failure, and there's so much stress in your body, and then you just plateau, and then eventually you're gonna start to come down anyway, right? So I know it sucks to like go back and drop the weight, but this is how you build sustainable strength over a long term, rather than just trying to, do a 1 rep max every single week, and you're putting so much stress on your body and your central nervous system that over time it's going to fatigue, and then you're actually going to see a dip. That's kind of what we would focus on in terms of strength. In terms of specific exercises, we haven't really mapped that out just yet, but I know for a fact that we are going to be focused mainly on these compound exercises and getting that to a really good level to where we can take that box of, okay, strength isn't going to be your main limiting factor anymore, so we'll be good with it. So we can move on to something a little bit more advanced of like rate of force development and speed and stuff like that. And one of the biggest things that I see within baseball players is you try to get too complicated too early, right? Athletes who haven't even built a good strength base, who can't even deadlift, 4 plates, can't even squat 3 plates, trying to do these complicated speed exercises, rate of force development, force production stuff that they see online, thinking that that's going to make them better, when you literally just have to stick to the basics when you're that level of athlete, right? You want to think about it like a pyramid where there are different types of athletes, right? There are 3 different types of athletes. There are more of the foundation, right, guys, who's an athlete like this, doesn't have a strength base, right, throws below 85 miles an hour, mechanics aren't very good. Like, these are all telltale signs that you're more of a foundation athlete who needs to build a really good foundation before going to the next. And obviously this one is more of an intermediate. These are the guys who are usually like upper 80s, touching 90 maybe even lower 90s. We can get a little bit more advanced, and they already have a strength base, but they might have low rate of force development, right? And so we would attack that. They might have the whole engine to throw hard, right? They might have a really, really good body to throw hard, but their mechanics just suck, right? And so that's kind of like these guys. We're intermediate guys to get to, 95 plus. And advanced, right, is the guys who are like 95 plus, okay? And these guys are the guys where it's nitty gritty details, right? Very small changes can yield big time results. And so I think it's important to note with the expectation of all of these guys, right? So like a foundational athlete, I know online there's a bunch of stuff. Oh, this athlete gained 5 miles an hour within 1 month. But with the foundation guys, usually, yes, velocity gains can come quickly and come at a lot because you are throwing at a lower speed. It's much easier to gain velocity when you're 78 to 82 than if you're 88 to 92, right? It is going to come, but because you need to build a big foundation, strength and stuff, it takes time, right? And so it takes a little bit more time. And so that's why I would say for foundation type athletes to see really good results, right, and get to 95 miles an hour, it would take, 2+ years, I would say. Okay. And sometimes you can get there earlier if you are actually doing the right stuff and getting coached and, getting programmed like this by someone like us, and you're actually doing the right stuff. Then you can do it like I did, where I went from throwing 78 to 96 within 16 months, right? Because I was guided in the right direction. But for those of you who aren't guided in the right direction, I would think 2 to 5 years, a long, long time for foundational type athletes. And intermediate, I would say, anywhere from like 6 to 12 months, right? More like 12 months. Where if you're an 88 to 90 guy, you already have a good foundation. And so it can be a couple of small tweaks that actually get you to throw 95 miles an hour, right? For example, for me, I was throwing 88 to 90. I already had a good strength base. I had decent mechanics. I was just decent at everything, right? And how I got to 95 was actually changing my training to more explosive rate of force development type training. And that was what helped me get to 95 miles an hour, right? And so a small tweak is going to help yield big time results. And obviously the advanced guys, for them to gain pitching velocity, it is very, very difficult, but it can almost be immediate, right? Because they already have a great engine, and most of the time it comes from mechanics of just like, okay, one small tweak and it's like, boom, 3 miles an hour, because they have everything there. Okay, so I would think about what type of athlete you are and match your expectations based on where you are, right? But obviously this can get very much condensed if you are doing the right stuff on the right program and guided in the right way. And again, at any time, if you feel like you have any questions or you want us to help you with your velocity development journey, you can book a call, first link in the description, and I'll see you there. So coming back to this athlete, step number 2 is to attack the low-hanging fruit, right? And we've already talked about with the strength, but I do want to talk about why it's so important to attack your low-hanging fruits rather than just doing what you're always doing. There was an athlete called Chris who came to us. He was throwing 87 miles an hour. You know, he was a beast, right? In terms of the engine, like he already had everything needed to throw really, really hard, but he wasn't getting there. The reason why was because he was just doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And he was working on what he was really good at, which was his frame and his explosiveness and his strength and everything like that. But he never worked on his mechanics, right? And that was his low-hanging fruit. So I want you to think about it like this. If you're playing a video game, right? And let's say your overall is like, I don't know, let's just say it's an 80 right now, right? And all of these are up here. They're pretty good. They're pretty decent. They're not maxed out, but let's just say this is like strength. This is mobility, rate of force development, your front leg block, right? All of these are good. But there's this one that's holding everything back. And so if we continuously work on these, yeah, it might like marginally make our overall a little bit better, but we would get the most if we were able to increase this and match this to the others, right? Look how much we can gain versus the other ones that we'll marginally get good at because we're already good at those things, right? But if we work on something that we suck at and actually become decent at it, that's a chance to make huge gains, right? And so that's why it's so important to attack low-hanging fruit. And again, for this athlete, it was strength and the mechanical side of he sucks at rotating. Also with the frame, right? And so those are the 3 things that we are going to attack. So let's increase your frame, right? Build lean mass. As obvious as it is, a bigger, stronger athlete is going to throw harder. I know everyone's talking about Yamamoto, but he's just an outlier, okay? For us normies, we need to get bigger and stronger to throw harder. There's correlations between the hardest throwers and how big they are, right? In general. The higher level you go, right? Let's just say high school is here, college is here, professional is here, lean mass just increases as you go up in level. And so it is very important. That is going to be number 1. Strength, right, is going to be number 2. And then the last thing that we're going to attack is the mechanical side of things. And this is how we view it. And because pitching velocity is a 2-part problem, right? There's the engine side of things and your body's ability to produce enough force to throw 95. And then there's the mechanical side of, are you moving well enough to throw 95, right? And so it's a 2-part problem. We need to identify what we need to work on the most with this guy in terms of the engine, which is frame and strength. And then the lowest hanging fruit on the mechanical side is the rotation, and more specifically, pelvis rotation. And I'm gonna go into depth a little bit more here. So for those of you who are watching and wanna get to 95, this is the process that I want you to follow, okay? Let's look at the frame and the engine. What am I lacking in terms of my body and my physical capabilities to throw 95? And what am I lacking in terms of mechanics, right, to throw 95? Obviously, you can work on everything. There's never going to be something that is perfect, right? But we just want to see which ones can we work on to yield the biggest results, and that is the low-hanging fruit, right? The things that we suck at, if we can get decent at. Okay, so that's what I'll look at. And so what's left is step 3 is to do the work and actually attack these lowest hanging fruits. So I'm gonna go into depth on how we would attack each of these, right? I know I've talked about strength with the progressive overload, but if you do wanna see a sample program or what something like that would look like, there's actually a free program that I'm gonna put right below that you can download, and you can see a sample program for baseball players looking to increase pitching velocity. But for a general overview of how I would like to approach this is usually like 3 to 4 days of lifting. Okay, we don't want to go too crazy with 5 to 6 days of lifting. We do need to give ourselves a lot of days of rest, especially because we are throwing, right? Throwing is very stressful on our body already, so we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not recovering. And so let's just say we're going to do a 3-day split. Okay, so the first one might be more of a deadlift focus. Okay, so for day one, we're gonna do progressive overload, the trap bar deadlift, just in the fashion that I showed you. Okay, and so this is something that we would run. And then, for example, on day two, we might do something like a single leg variation, right? Again, for something like a 3x5. This also we are trying to progressively overload, right? But it's a different stimulus to the lower body. And the last one, we might do like a squat focus, right? And then all of these are going to be progressively overloaded, and we are trying to get as strong as possible and push the body. This is very, very simplified and a general framework. For throwing, we do want really, really strong, explosive lower body. And the upper body, I mean, a lot of it is just elastic anyway. So yeah, being strong in the upper body is a strength, but that's not something that we really prioritize. Now, in terms of the frame, I've made a whole video on this, but to gain weight, it's extremely easy. And the guys at the Pitch Lab that we train, it comes very easily once we tell them a couple frameworks, right? And so we just need them to be in a caloric surplus state so that they are consuming more than they are burning, right? And this is where I would kind of go on a call with them and just guide them through how I would want them to do it. But an easy way to do it is to find foods that are very easy for you to eat and make, right? For example, for myself, when I was gaining a lot of weight, peanut butter sandwiches was something that I could make really easily and just get like 400 to 500 calories in extremely quickly, right? And so I'll do like 4 to 5 of those a day. And that would help me be in a caloric surplus. Some other guys, they're like protein shakes, right? And so they'll have like 2 to 3 protein shakes a day, and that's how they get their calories in. But the biggest thing with these two, right, is consistency, because it is going to take a lot of time and it's going to be a grind, right? But it's going to be worth it in the end, because once you build a frame and a strength base, you're not going to just lose it. Like, you're going to keep that for the rest of your career, right? I'm like the same size, or actually smaller than what I was when I was 18. At one point, I was 230. I took this too far, right? I was like, mass equals gas. I'm going to gain as much weight as possible, get strong as hell. And I actually started throwing slower because I couldn't move my body in a good way. But I'm actually smaller than when I was at 18, right? And so once you build this, it's going to stay with you your whole career. Now, let's go into the rotation and the pelvis. Now, how we were able to identify this is through a mechanical analysis, right? And really identifying where the energy is leaking and what we can fix to immediately start sending more energy up the chain. Okay, so for this athlete, it was the pelvis, and the pelvis is such a common issue with a lot of athletes, and you probably have this as well. And even I myself have this issue, which is I'm not firing my pelvis to the best of its ability. There are a couple things that cause this. For example, if you push, then it's not going to help your pelvis rotate into front foot plant. If you fire too early or try to go too early, right? You might actually fire your pelvis, but it's going too early. Like, you're firing your pelvis midair and it's not sending energy seamlessly up the spine, right? And so the biggest thing for this guy with the pelvis is going to be building out a throwing program and a plan on the mechanical side to attack that. Okay, so what this will look like is something like, okay, plyo balls, right? We're going to do a lot of plyo balls to attack the pelvis. We're going to do medicine ball stuff to, again, attack the same thing. Any type of long toss structures, and I'll go into what I mean by that. Velo structures and cues and feels. This is how we attack mechanical deficiencies. And starting from the top, plyo balls, right? Giving athletes drills that actually help with your mechanical deficiencies can help tremendously, because these plyo balls are going to attack the problem that we're trying to fix, right? So for example, pelvis rotation, we could do stuff like a janitor throw, right? Where we're here and then we are going here and really feeling the pelvis rotate before the upper body. Another one that I really like is like a drop step throw, where you're here, you drop step throw, really promoting this pelvis rotating and delaying the trunk to get catapulted forward, okay? So a bunch of drills like that. Medicine ball stuff, very similar. But I love the medicine ball because you have a heavy ball in front of you, right? And so it actually forces your spine to throw and get your hips to pull the throw rather than, if you're just throwing a baseball, then you can get very upper body dominant and arm dominant. But if you have a medicine ball, you need to throw with your whole body, right? And so, especially for guys who need to work on their pelvis or their spine, medicine balls are huge to be able to learn that pattern. And so for the pelvis, we actually have a long toss drill and structure for our athletes to follow to attack how the pelvis is moving. And this is gonna have a bunch of drills like I just talked about. It might include the janitor, right? And we're doing long toss out of that. Or we're also doing like a drop step and a couple more drills as well. But the overall idea is that each one of these have specific intention to attack your mechanical deficiency, right? We're not gonna just give you a bunch of drills and be like, look, just do these drills and yeah, you're gonna get better. And I know what you're talking about. Like most programs are like that. It's like, okay, we're gonna do the pivot pickoff, we're gonna do the roll in, we're gonna do the rocker, we're gonna do the walking wind up, and you're magically gonna throw 95. And if you're a guy who has done these programs, then you'll know what I'm talking about because you're probably doing those exercises right now. And what we found was that it was just a very inefficient way of doing things because there's no intention behind each exercise, right? Most athletes, when I ask them, why are you doing these drills? They have no clue. They're just like, oh, the coach told me to do them. That just can't be the case because we are trying to get better, right? We have limited time to get better. And so we need to know why we are doing every single thing. It's with intention. It's like, okay, I suck at this, so I'm working on that. And everything is directed towards this. So if I ask any of my athletes, hey, why are you doing this drill? They give me an answer. Okay, because I suck at rotating my pelvis. This is what helps with that. Okay, so that's how it should be. And then as we do these and this starts to get better, now we can move on to the next thing. And then everything is going to be directed toward the next thing in terms of mechanically, right? And so this is the best and the most efficient way of addressing mechanical deficiencies and creating a throwing program that we've found, okay? So moving on, velo structures, very similar to long toss structures. So we're doing various drills, various weighted balls that are gonna attack the mechanical deficiency. And with the velo structures, it's a little bit different because we also need to choose like which weighted balls should each athlete throw. Like should they be on a more of an underload focus, right, to build arm speed? Should they be on a more overload emphasis? Should they have like an advanced split of like, okay, we're gonna do a 3 ounce, 5 ounce, and a 7 ounce? Should we keep it a little bit more conservative with a 4, 5, 6? Like there's a couple things that go into that and we're able to identify that in the assessment. And the last one is cues and feels. And obviously this isn't gonna be part of the program, but it's part of the coaching, right? And this is why this is huge. And I would even say that this right here is like 70% of all of this, right? Because once you get the cue and the feel, then you can implement it into all of these, right? If you don't actually know what you need to do and what you need to feel in these, then it's very hard to get better, right? But if you have a cue, for example, with the pelvis, it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to get to my shoelaces on my drive leg, right? Because that's gonna fire everything and really make sure that my pelvis is firing. If we know that cue, then we can do it on every single pliable throw, right? Okay, so we're doing a janitor. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to my shoelace. That's all I'm thinking about. Bang. Okay, yeah, I feel that. Okay, sweet. Let's keep doing that. Bang. And over the course of weeks and months, that starts to get ingrained into you, right? And so just by getting these cues and feels and then implementing it into these drills, then you can really attack the mechanical deficiency. So I know this got complicated, but the simplest way to think about pitching mechanics and the way we view it at the Pitch Lab, right, is it's not complex. I know there's a lot of information out there, but it's a two-part problem. What can I do to increase my physical capabilities to throw 95? And what can I do to move better to increase my chance of throwing 95 miles an hour? And if you want to see the exact exercises, program that I used to go from throwing 78 to 95 miles an hour within those 16 months, then you can go check out this video right above.